Welcome to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast.
Supercharged by Amped Outdoors Lithium.
Catch more fish.
Learn tips, tricks,
Techniques. Secrets. And decades of angler's wisdom. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. Today I have Chris DePaola with me. He's from 120 Outdoors. And excuse me for a second. I dropped the ball. Forgot to bring my notes up. But Chris is a very knowledgeable muskie angler. How long you been fishing? 40,
almost 45 years for muskie.
Nice.
Chuck. So it's been a long time.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, I remember that fish.
All right. So let me tell you a couple things about Chris DePaola. First and foremost, he has a podcast, it's radio only. It's a 120 Outdoors podcast, definitely worth checking out. He brings on people like, Michael Durkalek, our guest from last week, and just people in that realm to share their knowledge and share their opportunities. And it's not just strictly fishing, it's also hunting as well. Chris has been fishing for over 45 years, and he's also very heavily involved in the conservation side of things, as well as being the youth coordinator for Muskies Inc. for still getting my notes down, and guys, 30 years. Sorry.
That's right. 30 years. Yep. A little over 30.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So why don't you go ahead, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so just like Chuck mentioned it, we have a podcast. My friend and I, Don Klaus, have a podcast called 120 Outdoors. Matter of fact, Chuck's too modest to mention. He was also one of our special guests here this summer talking about kayak fishing the Great Lakes. But we try to keep a local flavor to it. We're based here in northeastern Ohio, just outside of Youngstown. So we try to keep hunting and fishing close to home. And we talk about not only hunting and fishing, but also environmental issues that take place not only here, but across the Great Lakes region. As you mentioned, Chuck, I've been muskie fishing for 45 years. I've been fishing for everything under the sun since I was a little kid, just like all of us that love to fish. My dad got me started when I was just a little fella, and I'm doing the same thing to my grandkids. So, yeah, that picture there, that's a show I did, believe it or not. That's Mark Zona and Pete Maida and we did a show at Pymatuning Lake here back in the early 2000s, a muskie show for the Next Bite television show. We caught quite a few muskies on that show, and believe it or not, Zona got the biggest one. I still laugh at some of the jokes, so what a character to have in the boat. But yeah, fishing that long, you get to meet a lot of interesting people, make a lot of friends, and lifelong friends for sure. So, but looking forward to the podcast tonight, Chuck.
Yeah, that's what it's really about. We're not out there chasing fish and thinking about fish every second of the day just because it's only about the fish. It's about being in nature. It's about connecting with people that share your passion and also sharing your angler's wisdom. For me personally, just as a guide, the favorite thing for me is just being able to watch that angler evolve, whether it's one trip or two trips or three trips, if somebody's willing to listen, share that knowledge with them.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
So if you could pick one or two trips that you would consider as your all-time favorite memories, over the 45 years that you've been fishing, what would they be?
Oh boy. Besides all the trips with my dad, um, you had those, you had memories for life on those. Separate category, but as far as the recent trips, I mean, I've had so many memories, especially muskie trips over the past several years. But there's been a trip here. We had my buddy Don Klaus and I. We were fishing together. It was one of those muskie trips, real tough weather. The fishing was really difficult. 3-day trip, and we didn't see a fish in the last couple hours of the trip, and we're about ready to call it quits. And I mean, we are beat up, between the weather and it's cold blowing. You can barely stand up in the boat. And we both like to catch them casting. And at last 45 minutes, we end up boating 2 50-inch fish.
Nice.
He gets one first, and we're so excited. We're falling out of the boat, congratulating each other. And my first cast after he releases that fish, I get a 50-incher, just a trip of a lifetime. And then obviously we were done, we're just like, all right, it can't get any better than this. That's just, and we were on our way home anyway. We're exhausted, freezing and everything else, but just one of those great trips. And, one of the other trips I always enjoyed doing too. And Chuck, I don't know if you're familiar with the Pierre Marquette out in Michigan, the salmon run out there in the fall. Yeah. I thought you might've been out there before. I enjoyed that. It's a wilderness trip, wading. And salmon are not my favorite fish, obviously, to catch, but it's nice to do something totally different with a fly rod, get some salmon. And then there's also some steelhead mixed in at that time of year in a beautiful Pierre Marquette National Forest, just a couple of great trips there that come to mind. And as I mentioned, there's so many trips with my dad. I'd be on here for 4 days telling you about them. And half the time, my dad, we were laughing the whole time,
Right.
You know how that goes. So,
Well, that's what
me and my uncles, it was a trip all by itself with those guys, When I think
it was
I mentioned to you too, Chuck, my one uncle, this is on my dad's side of the family. My dad came from a lot of fishermen. And on my dad's side of the family, they were walleye fishermen. They would go to Lake Erie, and then Pymatuning. Got to remember, Pymatuning is a relatively young reservoir. It's just, what is it, 70 years old now or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And the first few years it was open to the public, my uncle Ralph goes out there and catches the state record walleye for Ohio out of Pymatuning. It was 13.5 pounds. And he held that record for quite a few years. And I remember talking to him about it. And it's funny, the technique that they were using then, they would use June bug spinners, and just like we're kind of using at Lake Erie, with a little bit of a night crawler on there and a slip sinker, and they had really, I mean, we're talking really rough equipment back then, steel rods, I don't even know what kind of line they were using. It was crazy. And I don't even know how they landed the fish they did, but it's, I can't find the pictures of all those. You watch, I'll find them tomorrow morning. But it's, I come from a long line of fishermen, and my uncles were always characters. I mean, family gatherings, it was always fishing we were talking about, and all
that's
the fish
pretty
they
cool.
would catch. Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned, is there an echo, or is the audio good?
Yeah, I got you.
Went away. One thing that you mentioned was, running the June bugs and stuff like that, which I run pretty much the same profile. But I run it with like just an inline trolling weight. And you mentioned slip sinkers, which is something that I've never thought about before. What's the benefits of that?
I don't know. I know at Pymatuning, a lot of it was there were so many stumps, the snags, and that slip sinker would ride over, hop over top of the stumps at a lot of times. And I mean, I think back now, they were actually ahead of themselves, even though they were a bunch of characters. They never took themselves too serious. They did catch a lot of walleye and some big ones too. And I thought about that a lot, very often. With the reason why they did it, I'm sure, is because it helped prevent snags, because there were so many stumps in that lake. Still are.
That makes a ton of sense, and I don't really deal with too much of that out on Lake Erie.
Right.
If there's a log on the lake, it's probably floating around a shoreline somewhere.
Right.
But that is everybody definitely take note of that. If you're on an inland lake trolling for walleye, maybe switch over to a switch or a slip sinker setup, with a bullet weight, and save some of your lures, maybe keep it in the strike zone longer.
Yeah. Definitely couldn't hurt. to try it.
So when we were talking, oh, sorry, we got a question. If you were limited to one lure for muskie, what would it be?
Oh boy. I hate to say this is easy for me, but it is. And it's one bait, and it's rubber. And I actually have a visual aid. I brought one with me. I dug it out of my tackle box. I don't know if you could see this or not. If I don't get myself snagged. It's a Red October tube. A couple of guys up in Buffalo, New York, started making these about 20 years ago to fish the Niagara River. And I got to know those guys very well. And I started using them on lakes, and just not because they were using it in a river setting. I started using them in lakes and different situations, totally different. And you got to remember, that's a 10-inch tube with the 3-ounce bullet sinker inside with 5/0 hooks on it. I started using that as I would fish a jerk bait or anything else. And I started having more and more and more success, especially when I go and fish big fish waters. That is one of two baits I have in the boat. I'm not a big bait changer. I mean, if you come fish with me, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, I have all the lures you ever wanted. If I showed you my picture of my basement, you would laugh. I've got thousands of baits, but I end up using the same 2 or 3 baits every year. And it's that big Red October tube. And then I like a big bucktail too. And I'm talking a big bucktail. This is an example of one of the ones. This is made by Muskie Frenzy. It's a stagger blade. It's a 10-12 double blade. I don't know if you could see it, but it's it's a very big bucktail.
Oh yeah. That's a double blade you said?
Yeah, it's a double blade bucktail. It's a giant bucktail.
Now, one thing,
a lot of big fish on that crazy thing too. So basically that's all I'm throwing are those 2 things.
Interesting.
So good question. And that's not just when I'm up in the middle of no man's land. Locally in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, I end up at the end of the day, what am I throwing? Those 2 baits.
Right.
It's crazy.
Now, one thing I want to point out real quick, if you are kayak fishing, throwing a double-bladed bucktail is very challenging to get going because your kayak is actually pulling towards the bait as you're pulling it towards you. That's not my tip. That's a tip from my buddy Derek Hollis, who's an avid kayak muskie fisherman. But single blade, you can always go with like a single blade bucktail and do the same thing.
Yeah, Derek is a very good kayak angler. I have my kayak too. I did get one last year, Chuck, as I told you.
Nice.
I haven't muskie fished out of it yet. I'm doing everything out of my Lund Pro V right now. But I'm going to try and do some muskie fishing this year out of a kayak. But that's a great point. And I thought about that. I often thought about that is changing bucktail, size and shapes and styles.
Yeah.
Who's this now? My buddy Jack Moga. Okay. Jack, Thank you.
For those listening, it says, known Chris for a long time, very positive fisherman, always had fun when muskie fishing tournaments back when. The next thing is a question. Where do you think the next world record muskie will come from? And to add to his question, because I think it's going to align, you mentioned your personal goal is a 56-inch muskie. I didn't look up the world record, but
it's just my personal goal is 56-inch, and I've got crazy goals. I do this to myself all the time. I'm setting goals with every fishing season, and for me, I've caught a couple fish over 55 inches, one casting, one trolling, and I've always wanted to push the limit a little bit. Let's see if I can get a 56-incher on there. And a 56-inch fish, just those of you that are not muskie anglers, it's a pretty rare animal. There's only a few places in the North America that give up that size fish on a regular basis. That's the first thing you have to take into consideration. You have to hunt where they are. Doesn't mean you can't catch a big fish in Ohio waters. You absolutely can, and I have done it. And of course, several anglers have done it every year in Pennsylvania, New York, so forth. but there's certain waters, to Jack's question, that have that potential for a world record. And for me, it's not that it's simple, but it's based on science. It comes down to the Great Lakes system. If you look at all the big muskies taken over the past decade, and you could look it up, Larry Ramsell, who I've met a couple times, actually bumped into him fishing for big fish. I run into Larry Ramsell, so I knew I was in the right place because he won't fish where there's not 56-inch muskie. But anyway, anything that's connected to the Great Lakes seems to have that potential. So French River, Georgian Bay. I don't know so much Lake St. Clair. The numbers of fish there, and there are some giants in Lake St. Clair. Great fishery, and I've caught some big fish out of there. But that wouldn't be my first choice personally for catching a 56-incher. Now remember, I'm trying to do this casting too, not trolling. And then nothing wrong with trolling. It's just not my thing. If I'm going to troll, I'll take the wife trolling and the dog or grandkids or the neighbor, whatever. If they want to troll, that's fine. But for me, I'm just as happy, pitching all day long. I'm okay with that. And if I don't catch anything, I'm okay with that too. I understand that I've been doing this long enough. I understand and appreciate the grind. I get it. But to answer Jack's question, I still believe that system would be connected somehow to the Great Lakes, either the St. Lawrence, the Ottawa River. It could be, Nipissing, which is the start of the French River. Could be the French River itself. Could be Georgian Bay. I think that's where the next world record is going to come from, is somewhere in that Great Lakes, the system there itself, in that watershed.
When do you think that would be?
I think it's going to be at the times of the year. It's going to be fall, simply because the fish are at the heaviest that time of year. They're starting to carry their eggs. They're starting to feed heavily to make it through the winter. And they've done some, the seasons like in Ontario and some of those areas up north, those seasons don't end till December 15th. And with this crazy weather we've been having these past several winters, it's extended that muskie season. I know a friend of mine who lives up in Ontario, he's fishing the past 3 winters well into December, which is not in their season ends December 15th. He has open water and he catches the biggest fish of the year, of course, in December. And so I'm thinking to myself, that's probably when it's going to happen. It's going to be that really odd time of year when the fish are at their absolute heaviest and they're vulnerable simply because they're hungry, trying to feed before winter sets in, ice up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So,
do we have any more questions in the chat before we move on to the next? Leesville. Leesville's a nice lake.
It is a nice lake. I like Leesville too. I don't fish it much anymore. I mean, I'm so close to West Branch. For me, I'm seriously 25 minutes from West Branch. I'm 45 minutes from Pymatuning. I'm less than 2 hours from Chautauqua. And I end up going to places where I can cast. Leesville definitely is a great casting lake, and they troll very well there too. I don't know if I was going to say the next state record in Ohio, if I was going to say today, like who would it be? I would maybe look at Salt Fork, bigger body of water, very fertile, has a huge forage base. It's a little further south. You could fish it at those odd times of year. Maybe Piedmont would be the other choice for the next. It is current state record out of Piedmont. But those 2 lakes would be my choice for maybe the next state record. Who knows? I mean, it might come out of, West Branch too has a ton of fish. That's why I like fishing it. And I know Mike Dirklak you had on last week. He loves West Branch too. Every time I talk to him, he's bragging about West Branch too. So there's potential in any one of the lakes. But if you put if I had to really make a choice here, I would say Salt Fork and or Piedmont would probably be my choices for the next state record.
So it's probably more likely with forward-facing sonar technology. I'm assuming the muskie guys are using that stuff too.
Yeah, boy, don't get me started on that, Chuck. It's really become part of. I hate to say this, the culture here, have good and bad to it. A lot of guys are using it the way and remember, this is just my opinion. It's not illegal. I don't consider it fair chase if you're actually harassing a fish and, basically casting to it several times to harass it to bite, to get the fish to bite. I don't know if that's what's happening. I don't have it in my boat. The guys I fish with don't have it. And there are guys that have it, I know, that are using it ethically, and that's great. Has it become predominant in the muskie world? More and more every year, yes. And it's not just here locally, Chuck. I've got friends in a lot of places throughout the Midwest here that tell me the same thing all over. Even in Canada now, they're seeing that technology. And there's nothing wrong with technology, Chuck. You and I've talked about this before. As long as you use it
ethically.
Ethically. That's right.
Yep. Yeah, we've talked about it before, just using the technology to become a better angler. On those tough days or when you're trying to figure out a new lake, there's a lot of value to see how a fish is going to react to a certain presentation, cadence, or bait. Even if it's like a day-to-day change and the conditions seemingly are the same, but you throw the same bait out there that they liked yesterday and they're doing something different. Well, now to stop and take into account, okay, what's changed?
Yeah.
And if you use the technology like that, I think that's where it should be, and then on game day, on tournament day, or, when you have a pretty good understanding, like, test yourself, take that away and just, that's the point, is like, I always think about it like this. What happens when power goes out, the internet goes out, everything goes out? All that technology that you depend on is gone, right?
Yeah.
So if you just use it to, get stronger and learn, if it goes away, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And, it's funny you mentioned the ethical use of it too. Mike Dirklak on last week, you had guests. I don't know if you guys touched on this or not. I couldn't remember when I watched your show. But I know Mike and I talked about this before several times with the forward facing, and he and I both agree. I wish it was never invented, but it's here. I mean, we can't stop it. It's here.
Right.
And Mike did it just a couple of weeks ago. He put on his Facebook page I thought it was very ethical use of that technology for trolling for muskie, where you could actually see how deep his baits were running in relation to the bait fish. And I thought that's a pretty cool idea. And if I was ever going to get it, I would probably use it like that.
Same thing with out on the big pond for walleye, people will run it forward so that they can actually see the actual level of the walleye before the boat gets to them, because you got to remember, when that boat gets to them, they're going to drop.
Yeah. So
by the time you see it on your sonar and they're at 30 foot, well, they might have been at 10 foot and they drop down, so it's interesting. One thing I wanted to ask is, when you're casting for muskie, what's your preferred cadence and technique? And I'm sure, it changes time to time and depending on the conditions, but like, do you have a go-to cadence if you were trying to give a newbie muskie fisherman that goes out and gets like a bucktail or something like that? What would you start them with?
A bucktail, that's probably your best bet. Oftentimes when I have someone new in the boat, that's the first thing I'll put on their line would be a bucktail. And I'll just tell them, throw that thing out there and just reel it in, just reel it in, not as fast as you can at first. Let's just see if the fish react to it, but just reel it in. And I make sure I have a high speed reel for them to use, because there's a lot of days. And you know how this is, Chuck, that little speed difference in that high speed reel can change the day from a negative to a positive day. That's a great question. Speed is a killer for me, especially those giant bucktails I'm throwing. I'm throwing double 13 sometimes. I know friends of mine are throwing double 14 blades, believe it or not, on these equipment. And they're using these reels and they're reeling them as fast as they possibly can. You do that for 8 hours, you feel like you were in a boxing match, But yeah, it's that's one of the reasons why, I mentioned the Red October tube earlier. That's one of the things I like about the tube or rubber baits is you can just, there's no right or wrong way of using that thing. Sometimes I just throw it out there. And I last summer, I had a great example was I wasn't catching anything. I'm marking fish thinking, what the heck am I doing here? I just throw the thing out and I let it hit the bottom of the lake. I'm down 18 feet of water. I bounced the tube off the bottom of the lake. I picked the tube up off the bottom and start bouncing it off the bottom. A couple of reels, bounce, reel, boom, fish. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I get that fish in, mid 30-inch fish. I release it. I throw it back out there. I count it down, bounces off the bottom. I can't see these fish now on my depth finder. I don't see anything. I got another fish doing that. So it's just like that. That's that. With that rubber bait, you could do anything with it. I could, strip it across the top of the water like a jerk bait, real fast, glide bait. I could run at medium depth. I could bounce it off the bottom. So that's, good question as far as cadence goes. And it just, a lot of times it's just feel for me. If I just got a feel for that time of year, what I've in the past, what the fish have done for me, I'll go back to that slow cadence, barely off the bottom, just popping it along. And then there's other times we have to make these big, huge bumps, big, huge swings with that tube going up and down, large swings, 6 foot, depth changes. And a lot of times that'll ignite a strike. So could do a lot of different things with some of those baits.
Yeah, that's kind of like, when you're smallmouth fishing and you're just kind of dragging a tube, maybe drifting with the current, and every once in a while you give it a couple good pops. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Just a lot larger tube.
Yeah, for sure.
So John has a question. Is there one memorable muskie that you lost over the years that you still wish you would have landed? The fish that wants you.
That's a good question, John. There's the biggest fish I think I've ever seen I caught. It was at 55.5. I caught on a figure 8 at boatside. That was really one of the most exciting things in fishing for me. I'm a visual person. I love seeing that strike at boatside. There's nothing like it. The excitement that you got a 40-pound tiger at the end of your line, and I got 4 feet of line out. But yeah, there was one fish in particular at Chautauqua Lake I lost a few years ago. I had it at boatside, and I got a good look at it. At the last second, I saw it come up and grab that rubber tube again, and it took off underneath the boat, and it jumped on the other side of the boat behind me. And when I turned, I got to see the fish going back into the water, and I had it on for quite a while. I had to, work the line up underneath the boat to turn it around. I'm by myself too. It was in late fall, and I got the fish to the boat a couple of times, had the net out, and it just come unbuttoned. And it was probably, 52, 53-inch fish. It was a very nice muskie for Chautauqua, beautiful muskie. And I lost it. And I know it wasn't long after that. I was upset, obviously, and I called my wife, and she's like, "Oh, you've done this so long, just keep casting." So I did. I hung up the phone and I kept casting. I got like a 47-incher half hour later. I'm thinking, this fish doesn't look anything like that one I had on. I mean, that one I had on was an animal. But that's the one. And it wouldn't have been the biggest fish I ever caught. It was just the way it hit, just like out of nowhere. One of those drizzly days in the fall, it's freezing and, ducks are flying by. It was just a perfect fall day for me. I love those fall days like that.
Oh yeah. And that's the best thing to do when you're starting to get cold from the cold temperatures is catch a fish, or at least hook into one.
Yeah, for sure.
The excitement is intense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. But that was a good question.
So we have another question from Sean Brock. What lake would you say you've caught the most muskie at?
Chautauqua probably. I mean, of the local lakes here, probably Chautauqua. In Ohio, I know you guys are going to laugh when I tell you this. It'd probably be Lake Milton. Lake Milton's got a ton of fish, and there are times when they stack up in there. Now, this is not casting; this is trolling. And there's days you can get multiple fish days there, short lining, close to the creek channels there on the upper end. But yeah, now overall, I'd say Chautauqua would be the most fish I've caught number wise there. And I've got plenty of big ones out of there too. And then as far as in the state of Ohio, I know it sounds crazy, but Lake Milton, and you gotta remember Lake Milton's close to me. It's like 15 miles from my house. So it's easy to make a trip after work. When I was working before I retired, you just run out there with the kids real quick and fish till dark, a lot of times. So
Nice.
yeah, that's a good question too.
You mentioned short lining. Basically, we do the same thing in the walleye world when you're just running short leads. But what's a short lead look like for you? Because I'm guessing you're probably 10 to 20 foot depth that you're fishing.
Well, short line and trolling. I mean, these guys that are musky fishing, they're listening to this know what I'm going to say here. Believe it or not, Chuck, that we'll have leads out 4 feet. I mean, you'll have your 4 foot leader almost hitting the top of your leader, or the leader almost hitting the top of your rod. Okay, so you got 4 feet of line out. That's it. Okay, and you're speed trolling over top of the emerging weeds. So that lure you're trolling is probably, maybe what is it? Be a foot or two under the surface, if that. And that's the short lining stuff. That has been very popular in Ohio, very popular at Chautauqua. I mean, I've used it everywhere in Canada too. Fish don't seem to know what's going on with that in a lot of places because a lot of people don't do it. But short lining here is very popular at times of the year. And of course, guys long line too. You could run leads, 50, 60 feet back and catch fish successfully too. But at times of the year, especially in that May, June timeframe, even April, if there's emerging weed and you could find emerging weed is holding bait and you're short lining near there for trolling now, you could have a productive day. Now I'd be casting there. That's what I'd be doing. You'd find me casting. So,
I've heard of people running their baits in the prop wash when trolling.
That's about what this is. Yeah, that's about it, Chuck. Yeah, the same thing.
So they're not afraid of the boat or the anything at all.
No. At first I thought how crazy that is. I'm running literally just the 4 feet, leader. That's it. Sometimes I'd even shorten the leader up, even shorter than that, and running it right next to the prop wash with the rod down in the water, right next to the side of the boat, and that reel would go off all day.
Wow.
You get 3 or 4 fish on that more, and the other rods would work, but not as productive as that down rod right next to the prop wash. So you're right. They don't seem to care. It's like apparently they feed off that, the confusion that prop creates.
Yeah.
In bait fish,
I've seen it in many different fisheries and many different species where they kind of target that kind of water, whether it's, like a power loading dock at a marina where they dig out the bottom underneath the dock. Those bass, as soon as that boat bumps that dock, those bass go crazy because what happens, all that turbulent kicks up and just basically disorients the bait fish. So the predators just come in and it's an easy meal. They're dizzy. They don't know where they're going. They're just swimming around. Eaten.
That brings up something. I remember a buddy of mine telling me, this was years ago, we would be fishing the St. Lawrence for smallmouth. And he's telling me, I found one of the locals told me a secret. And I said, well, what's the secret? He said, you wait till one of those, the ships come through, the big iron ore ships.
Yeah.
And what happens is they disturb the bottom. Of course, they're carrying all the heavy iron ore or whatever they're carrying in and out of the Great Lakes. And then he'd line himself up with the markers or structure near that shipping channel, and he would drag a tube through there. And I said, are you serious? We started doing that. And I'm half thinking this is a joke. It wasn't a joke. I mean, it ended up being very productive for us. And when you brought that up there, I started thinking, I remember this happening before with smallmouth. And every now and then we continue to do it. It's we'll go up and fish the St. Lawrence for smallmouth, and that technique still works. But I think a lot of other guys caught on to it too.
Right. Did we have another question on deck, Philly D? There we go. James says, what Muskies Inc. chapters are you in?
Okay, there's 3. Let's see, there's 3 chapters in Ohio. So I've been a member of the Cleveland chapter of Muskies Inc. for over 40 years. And a great chapter, great group of guys and gals. If you're interested, we'd love to have you. The Akron Canton also has a chapter. I'm not sure their number. I think it's chapter 16. And then Central Ohio down in Columbus, also there's a Muskie Inc chapter down there. And those pictures you're showing there, Chuck, that's a kids derby we had last year. We had the Field to Fork guys from the ODNR there for the kids. They were showing the kids, they would had walleye there, Lake Erie walleye they prepare for the kids to try. And you could see we had a great group of kids show up last year. It was our 30th anniversary, and it was the 75th anniversary of the ODNR. So we worked together there. John Treveline, the park ranger for West Branch and Lake Milton, contacted us in January, and we put something together where we worked on that project. We had 100+ kids there, and all family and friends. It was a great turnout. That's the largest crowd we've had. Probably in 20 years as far as the number of kids. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, the number of chapters in Ohio, there's 3. I belong to the Cleveland chapter, which is chapter 23.
Gotcha. And I believe I dropped the link to that in the description. If it's not there, I'll make sure it is after the show. I was going to ask you, what's the best way for these youth anglers to get involved? Because we're only as good as our the future generation. So this is really awesome.
Yeah, I've been doing it long enough now, Chuck. You get to see trends, in society. When I first started doing it, it wasn't uncommon for mom and dad to bring the kids. And that we always do it the first Saturday in June at Lake Milton. It's always the first Saturday in June every year for 30 years. And it was always, we'd have mom and dad bring the kids on out. And as it got, over the years, and I look at my grandkids, they're involved in sports in the spring of the year. It's hard for them to find free time, and it's hard to get kids involved in stuff in the outdoors. And, you don't realize how important it is to have grandkids, like myself, getting them involved. It's amazing, if you're not doing it, you said it, Chuck, if we're not doing it, it's not going to be here. It's so important to get the kids involved, and I try to take the neighbor kids, and I don't care who's coming. They can bring any kid with you, as long as you got permission, definitely. It's something I think is extremely important.
Yeah. Jack said he's from, what was that, chapter 19?
Chapter 19. Yeah. Okay. It's not 60, it's 19. Okay. Thanks, Jack. I didn't realize that.
So next question, especially since there's snow on the ground now and it's cold outside, temperatures are dropping. Do people target muskie through the ice? I mean, I'm assuming somebody does, but is that a thing?
I know a couple guys that have done it. I have never done that. Of course, the past several years, we haven't had good ice. And you got to remember, in some areas like New York State and at Pennsylvania used to have a closed season. You weren't even able to pursue the muskie through the ice. But here in Ohio, if you wanted to, and if we had good ice, you could do that. I really don't know anybody that would be doing that.
Just don't do it on reservoir style lakes like West Branch. What happens is, you get that sheet of ice and it could be 6, 8, 12 inches thick. And then they draw water out. Well, then you get an air gap there between the layer or the level of the water and the ice. And without that water underneath that ice, it's much less stronger. So just be aware of that and make sure if you're going to try something like that, maybe find somebody that does it, has done it before.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's dangerous there.
Yeah. I'm assuming you probably just, I'm sure somebody's probably caught one on a tip up or something. I know they catch pike through the ice all the time.
They would catch them quite a bit. There's some giant ones caught at Pymatooning every year through the ice, fishing for walleye. So, and if you wanted to target them, like Pymatooning might be a good choice because it's just far enough north. It's in the snow belt and cold enough there that if maybe we'll have one of those winters this year where you could ice fish. If you wanted to go out there and chase them through the ice, you probably could do that. I don't know. I just think the muskie get chased around enough as it is. I'd give them a little time off.
Give them a little time off.
Yeah. And I like fishing for walleye too, through the ice, Chuck. I think that's a lot of fun, and panfish too. That's great.
And for me, if I don't plan on eating something, I don't want to really put it through that much.
Yeah.
Like ice fishing, that's kind of, I don't know, I envision it's tough on the fish, so like I'd hate to just go out there and target something for sport and plan on throwing it back. I mean, of course you have bycatch and stuff and you do everything that you can to keep them healthy, but interesting.
Yeah.
So, Doug says northerns through the ice are a blast.
I bet they are. I'd like to try that.
Like you said, pomatooning. I believe mosquito.
Yeah, mosquito's got a good northern pike. Yeah, good northern pike population there. Yeah.
So let's get into your podcast. Let's start off with what inspired you to get into podcasting, and then we can go into like what's your favorite things about it.
Sure. My interest in podcasting came from I was writing for Esox Angler magazine and for Ohio Valley Outdoors for years. And over the years, everybody knows the publications or the print have disappeared and they've gone to social media. And I was working at the time and I was getting close to retirement and I wanted to do something in podcasting. I thought it would be interesting. And I did or was part of a local radio show here called the Outdoor Icon Show. And I did that a couple of years with the two guys. And I enjoyed doing that. And I thought it would be fun to do a podcast, but I wanted to find something. And we talked about it earlier, Chuck, and not just hunting and fishing. We wanted to talk about the issues. And I think a lot of times the hunters and anglers, they want to learn more or understand more about the issues, but just don't have the access or the know-how where to find it. And that's what Don and I try to do. We try to keep everybody aware of what's going on with the Great Lakes Protection Act, for example, or, whatever it would be, the hydrilla situation at Mosquito and at Pymatooning. We try to get to the truth of it, of what's going on there. So I enjoyed doing that type of work too, just letting the angler and hunter and angler know what's actually happening out there and not all the rumors. And then we do talk to you, like you, Chuck, and Mike Durkalak, and the next show, for those of you listening, we have a special guest. Those of you know D'Arcy Egan.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote for the Cleveland Plain Deer, was the outdoor writer for over 45 years. He's our special guest, our Christmas special. He'll be out on the 15th of December. And D'Arcy, it was an amazing interview, and I really enjoyed talking to him. He talks about everything he's witnessed on Lake Erie in his career, and it's amazing the stories he had. It's unbelievable. And he's going to come on our podcast again and talk more about it. But it's just, I think it's important especially for the young anglers out there. Lake Erie is an unbelievable fishery right now, Chuck. And you and I talked about this. It's the best in the world for so many different species. It's not always been that way. And it's an amazing turnaround that's taken place. And the ODNR deserves a lot of this credit, along with a lot of other agencies. The SOAR projects that took place in a lot of the major metropolitan areas in Cleveland and along the Great Lakes, and all the Great Lakes cities have done a great job cleaning up the water. And in turn, we're seeing what's happening here now. We've got an unbelievable fishery. And then D'Arcy goes into those dark days of the Cuyahoga River catching on fire all the way till last year. They stocked the Cuyahoga River for the first time with steelhead. I mean, who in God's name would ever think that would happen? And that's going to be, it's an amazing opportunity for us. And I love steelhead fishing here. It's fantastic. And just think we have another river with all that public access. And I know, Chuck, you can't wait to get your kayak on there. You probably have already had it on there.
On Cuyahoga?
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Oh, yeah. Just not on the weekend so much, and on the weekend generally, I'm with a client as well. So I try to keep them away from the heavy traffic areas. Just,
Yeah.
Like I don't want to first time out, make them play Frogger.
No, I understand.
You guys don't want to miss that episode. D'Arcy Egan is just a wealth of knowledge and a really incredible guy. Over 45 years writing for the Plain Dealer, and he's still extremely active in his writing and his outdoor recreation. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. I can't wait to hear that one.
Yeah, he's still out there fishing. He one of the pictures I have on our Instagram page, if you can go check that out. He has a 16-pound channel cat he caught in a Sandusky Bay last summer, out there fooling around. He's not a cat fisherman either. I started laughing. I said, "Would you turn into a cat fisherman now?" He says, "No, I was just out there fooling around." And one of the guys there happened to be guiding for a catfish, so he took me on his boat, and I ended up catching a 16-pounder. Channel catfish. So he talks about that, and that's something new that I didn't know was taking place in Lake Erie, was the opportunity for all those channel cats in the Sandusky Bay. And I did go last summer to see what it was all about. It's unbelievable, and I'm not a cat fisherman. You won't find me doing that very often, but it's a lot of fun. It's something different, and here again, it's all a result of the clean water. Everything improving.
And for those that don't know, Sandusky Bay is world renowned for channel cats, so it's one of the best places in the world that you can get out there and catch a true monster, a true giant, so definitely put it on your bucket list to check out, even if you're not a cat fisherman. At the end of the day, I don't generally target catfish, but when I catch one, I'm definitely smiling.
Yeah. I did go on a trip last year, and I don't know how many we caught. I stopped counting after like 35 or 40. I was just tired of reeling them in. And we didn't get anything huge. Like the biggest one was like 13 or 14 pounds, but it was nonstop all day long. You couldn't even eat lunch.
Right.
Yeah, seriously. I'm like, this is crazy.
The only way to keep it is, sorry, I was just going to say the only way to stop it is to keep your line out of the water.
That's the truth. You had to eat a sandwich or drink a bottle of water or something. But everybody around us was catching them too. That's what was crazy. You go up and make a drift. They'd go up and make a drift. It was like back and forth. Everybody's catching fish. So, but yeah, D'Arcy talks about that great fishery too. So yeah, if you want to check it out, I think you'll really enjoy the interview.
And I'll drop that link in the description as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it. But yeah, we've enjoyed doing the podcast. We've been doing it for quite a few years now. Got to meet a lot of interesting, great people like yourself, and it's amazing the number of people that we've come across in both hunting and fishing, and the guests that people are coming to us now that want to be on the show. We didn't have that years ago, so we actually have a list of people that we're trying to get on this year now that we couldn't fit in last year. So we're trying to keep it to our theme, what our core values are, the hunting and fishing, and that the environment, the core issues we have.
Right. Yeah. One of them you mentioned was the Great Lakes Protection Act. So for those who don't know what it is, do you want to explain that real quick?
Yeah, it's an act that actually, from what I understand, was part of what happened with the Cuyahoga River years ago in the 60s with the Clean Water Act. And then related to that would be the Great Lakes Protection Act. And I don't know all the details. Don's more into all that. He does all the research on all of this. But yes, the Great Lakes Protection Act comes up every year for funding. And of course, we had funding last year. We'll have to see what happens with the change in government this year. But it's just something to be aware of, that there's a ton of funding going into the Great Lakes. And I know, Chuck, one of the things we're going to do one of our podcasts on this summer is the introduction of all these native species back into Lake Erie, like the lake trout, the sturgeon. Those are all that funding comes from the Great Lakes, a lot of that from the Great Lakes Protection Act, of reintroducing those native species back into the water, native waters. So it's a great thing. And I don't really, I'm sorry, I don't know all the details on it. I don't have it in front of me. But I can get them for you. But it's something to be aware of. We always keep our listeners updated on that, what's going on when it's comes through the Senate and it goes up for vote. So
yeah,
that's just an example, one thing,
If you're a nerd like me and you love anything and everything fishing and outdoors, definitely head over 120 Outdoors and check out Chris's podcast. So we do have a few more questions to jump into real quick.
Sure.
Jack says, Chris, can you talk about the invasive weed problem in the lakes of Ohio and Pomatooning and what the Division of Wildlife is doing about it?
Yeah, Jack's talking about the hydrilla situation. I mentioned that earlier. And right now in Ohio, there's 2 lakes that I know of. Now, some might have changed. Maybe there's more. but Pima tuning and mosquito now has hydrilla. I know more about what's happening at Pima tuning. We actually had the guys from the ODNR on talking about the treatment process, and they spray certain section of the lake at certain times, during one year, and then they have to skip it the following year and they'll spray another section of the lake. They believe the maintenance plan they have at Pima tuning is adequate, and they have the hydrilla under control at Pima tuning. And if you fish Pima tuning a lot, you'll see what happens there. That hydrilla gets like a mat on top of the water, and you can't even kayak through it, Chuck. I tried last. You can't even paddle through it. It's so thick in spots. But they do spray it. Nobody's into the spraying thing, but that's one of the situations. That's something that's never going to go away, and they've now discovered it at Mosquito, and they're trying to put together that treatment plan for Mosquito Lake too. So at this point, I don't know what the plan is at Mosquito. I know they're probably going to end up doing the same thing they do at Pima tuning. That would be spraying every other year or so, and just maintaining and trying to keep the hydrilla from spreading throughout the entire lake. Yeah, that's what the hydrilla looks like right there. Chuck, did I lose you? Phil, did we lose Chuck? Oh, that picture of that fish there, that's I think that was a 53-inch fish there at Muskie. That's also from up north. That was caught casting, and that was also caught on a figure 8 with rubber, of course. That was a big fish, big heavy fish at the very end of the day type of deal. Well worth it. Long day on the water, but nice fish, that's for sure. And of course, Don was with me on that one too. So another one, I think this one I caught last year. Don't remember the size of that one there. I think that one was caught on blades there. Reeling is big number 13 blades or 12s, reeling as fast as you can. That one there was a tube fish, I believe. Steelhead out of Conneaut Creek, one of my favorite steelhead streams.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. I was covering for you, Chuck.
My, the downside of the new technology and stuff, my MacBook Pro only has 4 USB-C slots. So, I run multiple monitors, and then I have a camera and I have a microphone and stuff. So I had it unplugged, and apparently it went dead, and my camera is not working.
Oh boy.
But anyways, no big deal. That's why they say that's how live videos go, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Were we able to get through all the questions? Let's see.
Let me see if I got any on my end too. Chuck, let me see. I had a couple guys send me messages here.
It's been a great show, though. Tons of information, tons of knowledge. I really appreciate it. And anybody listening at home, if you have any more questions, we got 3 to 5 minutes left. Just drop those in the comments, and we'll get them answered for you.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So one of the guys here texted me, what kind of leader material do I use? His name's Richard. Richard, that's a good question.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question, because the fluorocarbons have become very popular. I do use the fluorocarbon, here locally. But when I'm fishing big fish waters, I go to that single strand stainless steel wire. And the reason for that is a lot of those big fish waters I'm fishing have rocks, and with those tubes that I'm throwing, a lot of times I'll get those tubes hung up in the rocks. And those fish oftentimes are very near the rocks. And it's a notorious for those fish to rattle or scratch my leader, especially fluorocarbon, across a rock or two. I've lost some fish, not giants, but I've lost some fish using a fluorocarbon, new big fish. So when I'm fishing big fish waters, and I believe I'm in big fish waters, I definitely go to that for casting now. I'll use a single strand stainless steel wire. And I use it, 120 pound or heavier. And I tie my own leaders, ball bearing at the top, a snap at the bottom, a good cross lock snap, high quality snap, just to keep it simple. I don't like buying stuff. I don't know who the heck made it or where it was made. I just like doing my own stuff. Same with fluorocarbon. I tie my own fluorocarbon. I'll buy the fluorocarbon. Obviously, I can't make that, but I make my own leaders out of the fluorocarbon. And I'll use 80 pound sometimes for trolling, 100 pound for casting. And that'd be just locally here. It wouldn't be for up north if I'm fishing big fish waters. So, but that's a good question. I didn't get any other ones, Chuck, that we didn't see.
Jerry's down there in Florida. His target species is tarpon from the kayak.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might have to talk to Jerry.
Oh,
yeah, that would be a challenge there. He's not going to have any problem muskie fishing then.
No.
He won't have any problem with doing that. So
well, awesome. We're about 58 minutes in. Pretty sure we got all the questions up. Oh, Jerry said, come on down. He's also the owner of Submerse Outdoor Gear. If you're looking for any cool designs or anything like that.
I may have to look him up for sure.
Cool.
As far as tips for beginners, Chuck, I know that's one of the things you wanted me to touch on real quick here, and I'll do it quickly. I think, and it's like everything else in my life, I try to simplify it. And I think if you do that from the beginning, just keep it simple. Don't go buying a bunch of lures and spending your paycheck on baits. Pick a couple of baits, figure out how to use them, catch some fish on them, and then figure out what you want to do from there. If you want to continue to learn to cast, you can expand your portfolio of baits from there. If you like to troll, you can do the same thing. But don't go spending your paycheck on musky baits, because you could literally, with the baits that some of these guys have, and I'm one of them, I could probably buy a whole house from them.
That brings up a great point. I went out to Kentucky to Cave Run Lake one time. The fishing sucked. I mean, it was during an ice storm, but Crash's Landing.
Yeah, Crash Landing. Yep.
I'm trying to. Is it Matt? I'm trying to think of the guy's name. But anyways, he wasn't open yet. It was before the season. He opened up just for us. And one thing that I was super impressed about that shop, if you are getting into musky fishing, like he has a lot of used stuff.
Oh, that's
for
cool.
Reasonable price.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get a couple of different options and not spend your whole paycheck on it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
If you're out that way or you make your way, to
that's
Kentucky.
A great idea. For sure.
Awesome. Did we answer Jack's question? We did.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Chris. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you sharing your 45 years of angler's knowledge with us. And really looking forward to that upcoming show with D'Arcy Egan. And we'll definitely have to bring you on soon. Maybe, I don't know, spring, summer, fall, something like that. Just do a follow-up.
Yeah, definitely. Same with you, Chuck. We have you scheduled for this year again now to come back on and talk more about the Great Lakes and kayak adventures. Yeah,
definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody joining in at home, thanks for joining in. Hope the show was a little bit better and more polished this time. Special shout out to Philly D in the back, taking all that work off of my hands so I can focus. And sorry about the camera going out. It happens.
Thanks,
That's
Philly.
live
Did a good
streaming.
job.
Oh yeah, great job, Phil. Appreciate it, brother. All right, guys, I will see you here next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have a special show for you with one of my clients. He came out with his son, and I don't have a two-person kayak, but I took one of my Slayer seats, and I figured out a way. It was actually pretty easy to mount it right on the back of my Titan X, and it worked great. So his son came out. I believe his son is 9, and caught some fish, had a great time. Well, then he did his research and came across a solution because he has a son and daughter, and he wants to take them both at the same time. So he got into a new Canoe Unlimited with 2 extra seats, 2 extra swivel seats on it, so he can take his kids. And we're just gonna talk to him and go through all that stuff and bring the kids on as well. So
that's a good idea, man.
thanks, John. John Young is from Burnsville, North Carolina. He's one of the people that we helped when I went down with Yak Attack. Really great people. He's the grandfather of Atlee, that little boy that outworked probably half the people our age.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. I will see you next Thursday.
Okay. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.
See ya.
See ya.